Good
Yes,
afternoon
can hear.
to one and all. We welcome you again to our lunchtime or noon devotion. Thank you for putting time aside. Okay, so today we continue the study and the discussion. And this week, as we have always said, is still continuing the whole journey of talking about normal Christian life. Okay, so it's normal Christian life. And this week we are talking about lust and temptation, something that some may not be so comfortable talking about it. But since it is in a normal Christian life, it is something that we all will have to face, whether we like it, because we are still on this side of heaven. And so the structure of this week, the being with Jesus, it talked about the first 3 days is on the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And it is taken from 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 and 16, which is actually the foundational verse for these whole weeks of devotion. Okay, 1 John chapter 2, verse 15, NIV write this: do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. Verse 16, for everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life comes not from the Father, but from the world. So that is our foundational verse for this whole week. And for the first 3 days, we talk about the 3 parts: lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And today we are going to talk about the source of temptation, how and where and why we get tempted. Then tomorrow we'll talk about how do we overcome temptation, remedy for temptation. And on Saturday, we will talk about how we can overcome temptation and how we can live victoriously. So that is the structure of this week. If you have the Bible, let's turn to James chapter 1, verse 13 to 15. James 1, 13 to 15.
James chapter 1, verses 13 to 15. And remember, when you are being tempted, do not say, God is tempting me. God is never tempted to do wrong, and he never tempts anyone else. Temptation comes from your own desires, which entice us and drag us away. These desires give birth to sinful actions, and when sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death.
Okay, thank you. Do you know that in each year, our SSMC Birds and Bees Camp, this is one of the verses that we teach the children, the 12-year-old, because as they grow up, they will be facing challenges in life. We prepare them. The Birds and Bees Camp is a camp where we prepare the 12-year-old to go into teenage, and hopefully we form the firm foundation, clear foundation as they begin to make choices in life. So years ago, this is a game. We actually have a big game, and the children will play game one whole afternoon. Part of the afternoon game will be finding this verse, treasure hunt in different ways. They have to look for the verse, and then they have to come back, and the children are made to memorize this verse. Okay, so it's talk about temptation. So we said right at 12-year-old, we know they will begin to face temptation, and we know that so much more for each and every one of us. So maybe today we will just look a little bit more on this. Verse 30 says, I read from NIV, when tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. So the first thing that's very clear from this verse is, when we are tempted, it is not from God. Temptation is not from God, because God does not tempt. Okay, so but in the BWJ, where does temptation come from? The first one, it is not from God. Okay, so whenever we are tempted, we have to be clear It is not from God. Like as it is also written in the BWJ, although sometimes God allows them. God will not tempt us on his own, but he might allow. Of course, the classic example, scripture truth that we always refer to is the story of Job. Job chapter 1, where Satan came to the court, heavenly court, and told God. He wanted to ask God for permission. He told God that, Job, you know why Job is such a good man? Because God, you never give him any problem. Okay, so then God say, have you considered my servant Job? In verse 8 of chapter 1, there is no one on earth like him, like Job. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. Then Satan replied to God, does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hand, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now, this is what Satan kind of challenged God. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to the face. And verse 12, that's how God responded to Satan. Very well then, everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself, he will not lay a finger. So in this account, that God allows Satan to test or to tempt Job, but God put a perimeter. You can do this and no more. So finally, God is the one who gives him and who gives the permission to Satan to do it. Okay, so we know that so God does not tempt anyone. Okay, so then verse 14 said, but each person is tempted, then they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. So then if God doesn't tempt us, okay, then how do we get tempted? So here the James chapter 1 said it is our own evil desire. And because of what we wanted, we are enticed. Okay, from this we know that a lot of time we get tempted because of our own weakness in our character. And we recognize that different one of us have different weaknesses in our character. And these are the areas that we get tempted, we get enticed. Okay, for example, possibly, but I'm not stereotyping, but possibly, generally speaking, men, as in male, will have more issue with money, sex, and power. Not that women don't have, but generally speaking. Okay, so these are three areas that generally men have more issues with, and they are more likely to be tempted in this area. But for example, for some women, maybe area of shopping. Okay, yesterday when we have the staff devotion, we had quite an interesting discussion about shopping. And one of our staff members said, if I go to the shopping supermarket, I cannot stop one, I must buy. And then if I see some more, if I see this particular thing, conflicts or something, if it comes with a free Tupperware, I must buy one because I get tempted. Okay, so different one of us, because of our character flaw, we can get tempted in different ways. Okay, and some of us are tempted in the area of food. Okay, some of us go for fine dining, some of us gluttony, eat so much, or some of us are junk king or junk queen, so you get tempted. Okay, some people say if I go to the supermarket or any shopping mall, I will not come out until I've got chocolate and different things, junk food. I must have it before I come. These are they are tempted by our own desire. And of course, November 11 is coming. I think at this MCO period, most of us get quite smart in shopping online. And when you know, it is so easily tempted. Each time you open any app, you come out this and this and this. So it's always a temptation. But if it is my own weakness, like Pastor Edmund Smith shared on Tuesday, 2 days ago, he talks about that is a revelation to me, where he said that, for example, at one time he was transgender. He said a straight man will go for a trans woman, but a gay man will not go for a trans woman because that is their weakness. So similarly, if he is a trans man, trans girl, he know he'll have weakness. Then of course he talk about vacuum, male vacuum. That is the weakness, and because of that, he is tempted in that area. Okay, and of course, there is also another area where we talk about temptation that we are weak in. It is also sometimes there is a linkage, spiritual linkage. Okay, for example, if my family seems to have a trend of promiscuity, okay, maybe my parents, my grandparents, they are promiscuous, and that is a higher tendency for my generation to also have the same tendency. So that's why we talk about the area of generational curse and generational renouncing, and that is in the spiritual realm, which is actually quite true, and this we need to be very conscious of. And we talk about, I think it was Auntie Isui who repeatedly shared with me the idea of it's not only, I don't think it's original, the other opposing spirit. So for example, if my family has a tendency of being promiscuous, then for me and my generation and my children, we have to be extra careful to guard ourselves, especially in the area of sexual purity. Okay, I think that is a little bit, I hope it is clear. So our temptation can come from our own weakness, but at the same time, temptation can also from other people, other humans. Okay, I was talking about birds and bees camp. I suppose it means a lot to me because this year is the first year in 20 years, the span of 20 years, where we're not able to hold our birds and bees camp. And different parents have asked us, when are we going to do it? And one of the big areas that we talk to the 12-year-old is a whole area of peer pressure. Okay, they are tempted. Okay, they are tempted to smoke as they grow up. They are tempted to try alcohol. They are tempted in drugs. And sometimes this temptation from other sources, other humans, can be very intentional or with very evil source. For example, in the whole area sexual sin, in the whole area of pornography, it is actually a huge business. Okay, and somebody has said this. So if those who are involved in pornography as a whole business, okay, if they can entice a 35-year-old man or woman, okay, not only men, some women are also into pornography, to get addicted to pornography, there is a huge market to them. Then they continue to say, what if they can get a 10-year-old boy or girl to get hooked on pornography? The length space of time of the business is even much greater. So that's why it is sometimes it's in the business. It is a whole area of business. Okay, and of course, in the whole area, people can get us to addiction, whether alcohol, drug, sex, online games, or some of us can get addicted to Korean drama and spend, I heard some people can spend a 16-hour at a stretch in a day, non-stop, sitting in front of TV to follow the 16 series of the drama, Korean drama. It is a temptation that other people place upon us. Okay, and it is something that will really get us down. Okay, of course, another source of temptation, which is we mentioned, is the whole area satanic spiritual warfare. The devil is the prince of the world, and the devil is going to come to kill, to steal, and to destroy, because he really wants to destroy God's domain in individual lives and God's domain in the whole world. He will be happy if he can get as many people, especially Christians, to go into vices and so on. Okay, and the devil is so smart or so cunning, right from beginning in the Garden of Eden, right until the temptation of Jesus and to Eva. There was, when we talk about temptation of Jesus, we always quote Matthew 4. Okay, but if you look at the parallel passage in Luke chapter 4, maybe we just quickly turn to that. Luke chapter 4. Luke chapter 4 is also a parallel passage recorded by Luke about Jesus being tested in the wilderness. The same thing. Then in verse 13, okay, they go the same. We talk about man shall not eat by bread alone. Then it is written, worship the Lord your God, and so on. And then verse 12, Jesus answered, it is said, do not put the Lord your God to the test. Okay, verse 13. When the devil had finished all this tempting, he, that means the devil, left Jesus, him, until an opportune time. And this is so telling. The devil will not give up in the spiritual life. He will use all ways and all means to tempt us, to bring us down, to get us fail, get us wrong, do the wrong thing, and do sinful thing. And he will wait for an opportune time. So for us, we need to be careful. We need to be careful to recognize our area of weakness and to have an opposite spirit. But at the same time, we need to guard our hearts. Guard against moments of weakness in our life. So sometimes when we are walking with the Lord, when we are being vigilant, when the devil tempts us, we know how to withstand. But there are moments of weakness, whether due to tired or due to various reasons, or where we are just straying away. It was a moment, it's an opportune time for the devil. So there's, I mean, later we were talking about in subsequent days, towards later part of the week, talk about armor of God. The armor, we need to put on the full armor of God. So we talk about testing and we talk about temptation. So what is there a difference between what is testing and what is temptation? Okay, just something, some of the temptation that we have read about in the Bible and we have discussed. Of course, we are very familiar, Adam and Eve, how the Satan in the snake came and tempted Eve and then Adam, and that caused the fall of man. Okay, they say that is this, you look at this, you will not die if you eat the fruit, but you will gain knowledge, you will live forever. Okay, of course, David, I think we mentioned a couple of times that David, how he was tempted, look, not doing the right thing, there is a moment of weakness, and he saw a beautiful woman, and then he slips and he ran all the way. Okay. Of course, another one we have not mentioned is account of Esau. Okay, when Esau, when he came back from hunting, he was famished and he gave up his birthright because he wanted a bowl of porridge from his brother. So those are some of the tempting. And what are testing? Okay, what are the testing in the Bible? Okay, we have talked about in a devotion, that's not quite number 10, about Abraham sacrificing Isaac in Genesis 22. Okay, we're familiar with that. Okay, and then I would like to turn to Deuteronomy chapter 8. It said this. Okay, I will read verse 2 to 5. Okay, this is where Moses told the people. Okay, verse 2. Do remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness these 40 years. So this is Deuteronomy, is another name, the second law. So when this is towards the end of the 40 years in the wilderness, this is where Moses reiterated the whole law to them. Okay, to humble and test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands. He humbled you, causing you to hunger and then feeding you with manna, which neither you nor your ancestors had known, to teach you that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. Then verse 4 that your clothes did not wear out and your feet did not swell during these 40 years. So this is the God testing the Israelites for 40 years in the wilderness. Okay, then of course, when we in Judges chapter 7, where God actually tested Gideon. Say when there was in the Midianites were coming, so God asked him to reduce his army right to 300 people. Okay, and then through the 300 people, God brought him reduce, and he won the battle. Okay, so what is the difference between testing and temptation? Okay, I would like to let you watch a short video. I will get Pastor David Paulson to share this with us.
You need to know the difference between being tested and being tempted. God will never tempt you, but he will test you. And you only test people hoping that they will pass the test, but you tempt them hoping they will fail. That's the big difference. Now, God will test you, so count it all joy when you're tested, when things get tough. God is moving you up a class, moving you up a grade. You know, when General Booth's wife suffered greatly towards the end, or was it Hudson Taylor's wife? Hudson Taylor's wife, towards the end went blind and was suffering quite a lot. And somebody said, why should God do this to you when you've served him so faithfully? Oh, she said, he's putting the finishing touches to my character. See? Count it all joy when you're tested. If life's easy for you, don't rejoice. But when you're tested, moved up a grade, God's setting you an examination, and he wants you to pass, and he will test you to pass you, to move you up. Life is likely to get harder. I find, for example, that guidance gets harder. Do you? The Lord took mercy on us early and gave us such clear guidance we had no doubt, and then he puts you in a situation where you've really got to begin to work things out for yourself a bit. He doesn't spoon feed you about guidance as you mature. Do you find that? Or maybe you're one of those who got a hotline to heaven and gets telegrams for everything you want to know. I find it does get more difficult. God puts you in more responsibility and trusts you to make judgments instead of just giving you a text. So he's testing you. But it's the devil who tempts you, and he wants you to fail. And he can only tempt you if there's something in you already that he can get hold of. If there's some desire in you that takes the bait. So there's a lot here about testing and tempting. In the world you will be tested by God, but I'm afraid you'll be tempted by the devil as well. But here's a promise from somewhere else. God has promised that you will never, ever be tempted more than you can cope with. Which means, of course, that the devil is totally under God's control. Isn't that exciting? The devil can't touch you unless he gets permission from God first. Read the book of Job. And he can't tempt you. And so God has promised you so that you will never, ever be able to say as a Christian, I couldn't help it. But I hear Christians saying that and queuing up for deliverance rather than facing the facts that God has told them, has given them the grace to say no. And that temptation is not too much for them. But the devil can only tempt us when we want something we shouldn't have. And he can latch onto that. And he hooks you. So in the world we face testing and temptation. One comes from God in the hope that you'll pass the test. The other comes from the devil in the hope that you'll fail. And we need the wisdom to discern which is which. A man once came to me on a Tuesday evening in our fellowship down at Guildford, and he said, oh, he said, David, Satan's been having a go at me all day. I said, tell me how. Well, he said, I got up late, and he said, I rushed my breakfast, ran for the train at Guildford Station and saw it just pulling out as I got there. He said, I had to catch the next train. I missed a most urgent appointment. He said, from then on, just everything's gone wrong. The devil's really had a go at me. I said, no, he hasn't. I said, why did you get up late? He said, forgot to set the alarm last night. See? We should not blame the devil, because often the flesh that's the problem, you see. I don't think the devil had any hand in that whatsoever. But it's so nice, you know, for Christians to make the devil the scapegoat. When the devil really gets at you, but it's more serious than that. But we shall be tempted, but never more than we can cope with.
Okay. Okay. So that was, I think what David Pawson said was very clear, that the devil has seen something weakness that I mentioned. If we do not have the weakness, we will not be tempted. Okay, I will stop my sharing shortly, but I would like in our discussion afterwards to consider this question. Can I be tempted in my testing? Okay, we say that a lot. God doesn't tempt us. God tests us. The devil tempts us. So I would like us to discuss, can I be tempted in my testing?